Hello and welcome. This is Guy Glidden, and this is screencast number 3, all about trying to provide support for you for the development of Excel skills. If you've already seen lessons 1 and 2, you know that lesson 1 was about the basics. Lesson 2 was all about a set of tasks to help you use Function Wizard. And we included a brief opportunity to set up pivot table. Let me start with a couple of one brief explanation about Function Wizard uses. I demonstrated 4 uses during that last lesson, and I need to remind you that when you go to the menu for Function Wizard, the terms you're looking for are provided on this sheet. Average is the term you look for if you want a mean or arithmetic average. Median will give you the middle case. STDEV is the abbreviation that is used by Excel for standard deviation. Pearson, a person's name, is really a correlation coefficient for 2 variables. And you're going to see that several times later in examples I'm going to use in the class, so that will give you some idea on that. Let's go right ahead and talk about pivot table because we need to get moving on that. That's a pretty important concept. And I'm going to return you right back to the file that we left last time. This is the file of test score information that I've abbreviated for this use. It's called Reading School 101. It has 100 test scores. And it is a really a real live test data file for high school reading tests. It was the actually the 2001-2002 equivalent of the current reading test. So the form is good enough for our use. To set up a pivot table, I want to go back and do this very quickly. Remember that pivot table is located under Insert, and you're going to click the icon at the top, and you're going to see pivot table come up in the far left-hand corner. And now I'm going to click on pivot table, and nothing shows up, which has happened because I didn't have my cursor on the pivot table. Let's try it again. Notice that a difference does. The first time I did it, I didn't have my cursor on the data. Excel didn't know where I was. Second time I put the cursor on the data file, set of data I wanted to use. Immediately, Excel assumed that I want a pivot table set up for the sheet Reading School 101. It assumes I want that to start with over in the corner in A1, cell A1, and you'll see the little dotted line, squiggly line, which makes that pretty clear. It goes over to M1, so M is the last column, and it goes down to cell 101. In order to make this work clearly, this is a good lesson. You need to make sure your data file is cleaned up. In other words, the rows have to have names, the columns have to have names, extraneous data needs to be cleaned up, and it'll find it just fine. And if you do that and you click on this right here, it's going to create the pivot table on a new sheet. And you're going to recognize it because over on the left-hand side is going to be the drop data items here boxes. And over on the right-hand side of the sheet is going to be the screen, which is the menu of functions. So doing that, let's get right about the business. The first thing we want to demonstrate is to do a frequency distribution, and we're going to do this with a thing called narrative test scores. This is a set of 100 test scores. A narrative is a subset of the total test. So if I drop narrative in the values box, it thinks I want to sum that. I don't want to sum that, but if I go back in with my left mouse, go to value field settings, change that to count. Remember, I have a specific function in mind, and it's going to change it. Now, I'm not going to scroll. I'm not going to take the screen across and show you that that simply says there are, in the little box over on the other side, it says there are 100 cases there. Because I want to get to the business part of it. If I take the icon for narrative again and drag it down to the row labels box, what I've done is I basically modified that by itself. So what we have is we have a distribution of scores. It shows us that, and the name frequency distribution is pretty clear. Distribution tells us that the range of test scores in this group is from 48 to 100. That's the total range. Frequency identifies the number of subjects at each score level that there are scores, and as you can figure out, there will be more than one at some of these levels. That's what a frequency distribution is. Now you might ask, could I have done that as well by using the column label section rather than the row label? Yes, you could have. But unfortunately it would look like this, which is kind of hard to manage. So it's a kind of a narrow, long, horizontal thing rather than a vertical. And vertical is a little more easy to deal with. I think we'd all recognize. So let's move it back here, if I can get this done. And here we are. We're back at the frequency distribution. Now let me show you a really quick use of things that you can do with pivot table to help you make life easier. And to do this, I'm going to start by making a copy of my pivot table I created. And I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to paste it right down here beside where I started here. I'm going to use the regular paste because all I've done is I've created a second pivot table right beside the first one. They look exactly the same. Now I did that because I didn't want to go to the trouble of setting up a second pivot table. It's kind of messy, but with the existing pivot table I can go back in, go over here, and I want to modify this second pivot table to put some information side by side with the first pivot table. And to do that, I'm going to remove narrative. I'm going to go over and I'm going to change count to an average. And doing so, I've created an average up here, which you're going to see right here. Now you've seen that average before, that's no information, but look what I do with it. I want to make a copy of it. Copy's pretty easy. And I'm going to plunk it down right beside the frequency distribution, pretty close to the level of the score 85, only I'm going to use something called a paste special here. And by doing so, I simply pasted the value, not the pivot table function. Now I did that because now I've got a little visual reminder. That's where the average falls on the distribution. And if I do that again, I go back up here. My pivot table is still functioning here. And now this time I'm going to show you I can go up to this screen as well and I can modify the thing. I can use my value field settings when it's the floating menu thing. Uses a right mouse rather than a left mouse. So I think it does. No, it does. It uses a left mouse. Sorry about that. I was wrong about that. I'm going to change that to STDEV, which is standard deviation. And again, something you've already seen before. Only this time, if I kind of put this on the beside the frequency distribution, and approximately the length it would be if we had a +1 frequency distribution. So it would be somewhere around 96. And we'll place the special. We're going to put that value in there. So 85.21, 11.11. That's pretty close. That's close enough for jazz. It's close enough for a visual image. Okay. And then if I do the same thing again, only this time I'm going to scroll up here. Use this little menu again, and I'm going to need to make another copy of it here. Only this time I'm going to put it where it would be if I subtracted 11.11 from 85.21. It would be about 74. We'll put it right about here. There isn't any 74 score value here, but it's going to be pretty close to the kind of the range where it'd be. Probably somewhere around, we'll just put a 75 down here with the fake. So, because what that's going to tell me is I have a nice visual demonstration here, and that tells me that these guys down here below a score of 75 have pretty low scores. So that would be a quick and dirty way for me to get a quick idea of who are the guys who are far enough below the rest of the students in this class that I got to pay special attention to them. So there's a quick demonstration of the use of pivot table with the idea of the frequency distribution. Now I'm going to remove this junk from the page because I want to go back to this one pivot table, and we're going to modify this again. Going to do some different things, and here I want to remove the word narrative. So now I'm right back where I started from. I'd simply have a little count here, but now I'm going to change count to average, and here we go right here. Now that's not a big deal, but look what happens when I take scores for the race category and I put it right below in the bottom. I can do it over here as well as on the menu. I now have averages for all of the racial category groups that I have in this distribution. That's a pretty quick, effective use of pivot table. And now if I want to do the same thing with sex or gender, bingo, I have just that quickly created a display of a whole bunch of different articles. I'm going to copy those. I'm going to bring it down to the bottom down here. And I'm going to do a space special. And I've got the values there. Now I'm going to go back and do something else here that would be kind of handy. I'm going to go up to average, and I'm going to use that little mouse again to find my value field settings here. And I'm going to change that to count. And the reason I'm going to do that is because the other question after we look at the averages, somebody would probably ask me, well, how many people are in each of those categories? So now, if I do a paste special down here, put values up here, and kind of a little below the level here. Let me bring that up a little bit here. And here you go. Now we have a quick reminder here, and that's a pretty valuable information. So pivot table is really the valuable tool for categorizing and organizing information of this nature. And let's do one more thing with this, and to do that we're going to destroy and throw away everything we have here, because I want to start afresh. Now let's go in here and let's go to performance description, and we're going to put that down in the values section here. And I'm going to put performance description. I'm sorry, I'm not showing you what I'm doing here. Here's where we are. Performance description is down here by count. And then I'm going to take performance description again and put it in the row labels. And this tells me that of the students who took this test a number of years ago, they aren't necessarily, but here's the group that had satisfactory scores, advanced scores, basic scores. They were proficient, that's what they used to use in the old term, level here, and unsatisfactory. These were the categories used, but you still categorize scores. It's the same difference here. And I can go back over here again, and if I want to, I can do this by gender. So now that tells me for each of these people I've done this. And now I've kind of run out of categories, but what I can do is I can take race, and let me show you what I'm going to do with race. I'm going to take the race information, and I'm going to put it down in the report header so that when I come back over here, I can come up with individual reports that tells me there are only 2 American Indian students, and there's how they did it. And there are 10 Asian American students, 16 black students, 4 Hispanic students, had 3 Pacific Islanders. So there's a lot of information I can distribute very quickly by the use of pivot table. It's a pretty valuable tool. I hope you can use it.